There's clearly a lot of misinformation about nutrition these days. It's pretty much as numerous as the stars in the sky. And why? Why is there so much misinformation? Really, what we see is that it sells. The more confused we are, the more we buy into the next diet, the newest fad, and really buying into kind of this ephemeral eating advice. One often very misunderstood nutrition topic is our farming practices in the U.S. So let's get into it. Organic versus conventional farming. A survey asked why organic food buyers chose organic over conventionally grown food, and the number one reason was the belief that there was no pesticides, or at least less pesticides used in organic farming. And that's just a complete falsehood, right? I mean, there are pesticides used in both organic and traditionally grown farming, both systems. And as you can see here on the slide, really there's actually more in common with organically grown foods and traditionally grown foods, more than really they have in that are different from each other. So, I'd like to point out they're both safe, right? Both sets of farmers are very conscious about sustainability, and they're both very tightly regulated. There's both trade-offs, and the overwhelming amount of research shows that both are equally nutritious. I really have not seen a study, at least a well-done study, that shows organic food is more nutritious. Every meta-analysis I've ever seen shows that they're equally nutritious. So what are the differences between organic and traditionally grown food? Well, one of the big ones is, since they both use pesticides, is the different types of pesticides they use. So organically grown food uses naturally derived ingredients, whereas traditionally grown food uses both natural and synthetic ingredients. Oftentimes people attribute, okay, well, if it's natural, it must be more healthy, right? And pesticides, by definition, are meant to kill living organisms, right? So the important thing to remember here is neither is really more healthy than the other, right? They're both meant to do the same thing. And due to being able to kind of more adjust and create more combinations, the traditionally grown foods pesticides often have more of a long-lasting effect and don't have to be sprayed as often. And so they're kind of more efficient and more effective. So, there's a lot of farmers who kind of complain that grow their foods traditionally, that say, hey, we're only spraying our crops once a year, opposed to these organic farmers who are spraying kind of continuously. Yet people are saying that their food is so much more nutritious and less harmful when you look at it. According to the National Center for Food and Agriculture Policy, the top two organic fungicides, copper and sulfur, are used at a rate of 4 and then 34 pounds per acre. In contrast, the synthetic fungicides, so those used in traditionally grown foods, only require a rate of 1.6 pounds per acre. So that's less than half of the amount of even the best organic alternative. So it's important to remember that there's kind of one of the trade-offs you get with the naturally derived ingredients is they're less effective, and also very often less environmentally friendly even. So how does organic and conventionally grown pesticides kind of stack up in research? And really, just as we've kind of mentioned, the safety and the eco-friendly nature of the pesticides were really quite equal. Just kind of different trade-offs is really what existed. What they really found is, though the two groups were equal, it was kind of more dependent on the actual farmer and what methods they were using that made each one more sustainable than the next. It really, from organic to conventional, they were equally the same between the two groups. Another great meta-analysis done found that, one, exposures to the most commonly detected pesticides on the 12 commodities that were in this research study pose negligible risk to consumers. So both of these systems, both organic and conventionally grown foods, really pose negligible risks to the consumers. Secondly, the substitution of organic forms of the 12 commodities that were part of this research study for conventional forms does not result in any appreciable reduction in consumer risk. And this was a massive meta-analysis. So once again, to re-emphasize that safety-wise, these two systems really are equivalent. And when I ask my patients when they feel really very just passionate about only buying organic foods, when I ask them, why is it? The number one reason they give me is safety. And once again, just really the overwhelming amount of research goes to show that both are very safe. For a demonstration of this, there's a website that's called safefruitsandvegetables.com. It was created by the Alliance for Food and Farming, a nonprofit organization which represents both organic and conventional farmers, and was developed in conjunction with experts in the fields of toxicology, risk analysis, nutrition, health, and farming. And they compiled information of what you may have heard of, like the Dirty Dozen, for instance, these foods that are often just attributed to having just incredibly high pesticide residues. And what they did is they compiled, okay, these certain foods, how much would, a woman or a man or a teen or child need to consume a day to be without any effect from these pesticide residues if they were to consume these strawberries with the highest recorded residues. And what they found is, so if you can go in, you can put, whether you're a woman or a man, whatever, it'll tell you how many servings, so not individual fruits, but how many servings of these you have to have a day. So the serving of food is generally half a cup. Imagine that's what they mean. And so when I put in my information, it says a woman could consume 453 servings, so half a cup, so like 225 cups of strawberries in one day without even having an effect from these strawberries if it was at the very highest amount of pesticide residue ever even recorded. So that's quite a bit. Just another example was with peaches, and that one was 4,716 servings a day. So really, my point is here that the USDA really has done a great job, especially in about the last 30 years, in really tightly regulating the amount of pesticides and what our pesticides are that are that are put into our traditionally grown foods. Just maybe a way of kind of example with this, how safe they really are. I have my sweet, almost 98-year-old grandfather, before they kind of discontinued a lot of these pesticides. He's just he doesn't grow food for anybody, just other than himself. But he has a license to purchase pesticides, and he purchased up some really just the pesticides that are no longer allowed to even be sold due to the harmful effects to humans. And that's what he uses on his pesticide, his farm. Those are the pesticides he uses on his crops. And here he is, eating some of those every day of life, and he's 98 years old. So, and those are the pesticides we're not even allowed to use anymore in the U.S. So, just kind of by way of example, that we really do have a very, very safe food environment. One of the other differences between organic and traditionally grown foods is with organic that includes no GMO farming. However, GMO farming is one of the branches of traditionally grown food, and it's also the most misunderstood of the farming systems in our country. It's often understood by the common public that GMOs are really bad for us, and just a lot of negativity. And it's interesting, when I was doing the research on GMOs, however, there's an overwhelming amount of research about really what a positive and needed part of our food system GMOs really are. A common misconception that I hear very often is that just because something is grown traditionally, a lot of people believe that to mean that it must be also a GMO, it must be also a genetically modified organism, and that's just not true. To date, there's only 10 genetically modified crops even approved to grow in the U.S. So, a lot of people I know of really believe every apple they've ever eaten has been genetically modified, and that's just not true. Apples just in 2017 have been approved to be on the market as a GMO crop, and so really a lot of the apples you've ever eaten have very much not been genetically modified. Um, just really quickly, I wanted to touch on what is the difference between being genetically modified and being selectively bred. So selective breeding has been happening as long as there's even been horticulture around, right? As long as we've been growing, so the human race has been growing foods, we have been selectively breeding, right? So that's when we take the best of the seeds from the sweetest of all the carrots that were grown, and those are the ones that we use for next year, right? Or we crossbreed the sweetest corn with the corn that was the most drought resistant. You know what I mean? So that's selectively breeding, and that's been going on once again as long as we've been growing food. And that's different from being genetically modified, where they're going in and specifically changing a component of the DNA in the genetically modified organism. Something to remember about genetically modified organisms is that they were designed to help us. They were not designed to harm us. So I think oftentimes people just see them as just the devil that needs to be absolutely avoided, and that's just really just not true. They're designed to be safe. They're designed to fulfill a need. For instance, one of the examples with golden rice. You've probably heard of golden rice. The World Health Organization reported that 25 million preschool children are affected by vitamin A deficiency around the world, usually in third world countries, and that providing those children with vitamin A via golden rice could prevent about a third of all under 5-year-old deaths, which amount to 2.7 million children a year that could be saved from dying unnecessarily. So, very beneficial worldwide. And that's not to say that there are no issues with genetically modified organisms and the growing or whatever. As we're going to get to that there's really trade-offs with all three of our growing systems. However, the Oxford Research Encyclopedia points out there's only a limited number of traits that have even been incorporated into genetically modified crops, as you can see on the past slide with the 10 crops. The two primary traits, basically the only ones that are ever used are for either herbicide or an insecticide. And so that's really the point. And because of that, the genetically modified crops have facilitated the adoption of more sustainable farming practices, in particular to reduce tillage and reduce pesticide usage. So once again, it's kind of in this conjunction with sustainable practices, and it's important to recognize that as such, that the point of genetically modified organisms was actually to reduce the pesticides, reduce the tillage, and be more sustainable. There's a book that came out recently called Tomorrow's Table, and it really talks about these three different growing systems, the organic, traditional, and genetically modified, as being kind of three parts in a whole. So we really need all three. Bill Gates puts it when reviewing this book, that I agree with the authors, that we need the best ideas from organic thinkers, from scientists, and from genetic engineers to feed the world and help the forest. That all three of these systems are really needed as we go forward in our country. And so I think that's really important. This is really the key point I want to make with this, that there's no perfect food system, right? There's trade-offs between each three of them. However, in purchasing all three of them, we're supporting the best of all of their practices and kind of helping progress what is best and moving forward. So what does this mean for you, the consumer? The way I kind of like to look at it is, once again, that each one of these food systems contributes to the whole, that we really need each one of these. Each one of them play an important role in our food system. So, when you go to the grocery market, let's say you've noticed that there's this one brand of raspberries you love the very most, whether that's organic or that's conventional, then how about that be the one that you purchase, and it be based on preferences, right? Okay, going back to preferences. A lot of us are kind of tight on money. That probably means that more often than not, the conventional foods are going to be kind of the biggest bang for our buck, right? Every now and again, maybe the organic food will go on sale even cheaper. It's been great. Um, Once again, just really emphasizing that let's do intuitive eating when we're thinking about purchasing our food and not just the cost, price, and the labels.